So in this session, we're going to cover your select, from, and where statements, and also explain your group by, having, order by, and then talk about how SQL Server actually execute these statements. So the learning objectives for this video are for you to be able to use and explain the different DQL statements, perform their operations accordingly, and know and practice with the DQL syntax that has been used. So first up, we're going to go over the select, from, and where statements, since these are by far the most common ones. So first, let's talk about select. Select is what you use to pick which columns of data you'd actually like to view or display. From is used to select what tables you'll be picking these columns from, or where the data will be at. Lastly, where is used to specify some kind of criteria that you use to sort data by. Typically in where you'll use what are called operators. Now, having the equals, greater than, less than symbols, these are referred to as mathematical operators. And then having different things like between, in, like, not like, these are called logical operators. So from selecting tables and selecting data in those tables, one common thing you'll see is typically simply select star. When you use that asterisk, it simply says all columns. So instead of you having to type out every single column, you can simply say select asterisk or star from and then the table. If you want to specify the columns, you will say select and then a column name, comma, another column name, and say from which table. And then when you want to have a condition, that's when you'll have your where clause, such as saying select all where ID equals 2. Now going into SQL Server, what we can do is we do have our test tables. However, in a previous video, we got rid of all the data that was inside of them, so we can't really use those too well for showing DQL statements. However, AdventureWorks does have quite a bit of data in it. And because we're simply doing DQL, which will only fetch data and not modify it, we can use something in here. So what you can do is go ahead and change to your AdventureWorks database, and we'll do select statements in there. Now, to give a basic one, what we'll do is, first thing we'll do is simply say a select all. So we'll say select all. And then since we're in AdventureWorks, we can pick a table here. From human resources dot employee. When we execute this, it retrieves all of the data located in that table. So we see the different columns that are listed, and if we want to compare them, we can find it over here, in which case we have human resources employee, expand it, find columns, and then there are the columns listed and their various features. So this is simply saying select and from. At the very minimal, select and from you will use. You don't need to have a condition, you don't need group, you don't need having, you don't need order, but at very minimal, you're going to have a select and a from. Okay? So let's say now we want to select only specific columns. Let's say select, and we'll pick job title, birth date, and marital status from human resources dot employee. If we highlight and execute those, now you see only job title, birth date, and marital status is displayed. Now let's say you don't remember the columns in there. Since SQL Server has IntelliSense, it will use a drop-down list to kind of display what it thinks you're going to type. One thing you can do, if you don't remember the columns, is say select, skip it, and go to from, and you can specify your table. And then go back to the select statement and start choosing your columns from there. Now let's say I type in J. It has the IntelliSense, which drops down a list, and job title's on there. So I'll select that. Now let's say I type in B. It'll list some of them, birth date, business entity ID, and such. I want birth date, so I'll take that one. And then last one, course, marital status. It gives me a couple other ones in there, but I know marital status is what I want, so I can click and use that. And it will display the information in the same way. You know, there are different ways to writing it. You don't always have to know all of these columns that you're going to use. Sometimes using the IntelliSense can help you still find the columns even if you don't remember what they are. Now let's go ahead and go back here and get the rest of our information. And now let's use a condition. We see we have different job titles, we have different IDs, we have different birth dates, marital statuses, and genders. So let's start using different conditions. Let's say select from human resources .employee where business entity ID equals 2. If I run that, it gets me 2. Now let's say I want to specify multiple IDs. Well, I can't use just a normal mathematical operator here, depending on what my condition is. Let's say, for one example, I want to specify all the IDs that are greater than 50. Well, I can say greater than and 50. Now, all these IDs, starting from 51 up, will be displayed, and they're all greater than that. Now, that's using mathematical operators, and that's fine, but let's say there's specific IDs we want to display. We want to display, let's say, IDs number 5. Let's give 5. Let's say 10. Let's say 45, and let's say 102. All right. Now, we can't simply just say where ID equals and then name these. We have an issue, right, with the comma. So this doesn't work. Instead, what we say is where ID in. So we're going to use a logical operator, and then we're going to put these in parentheses. So now when we use this logical operator of in, we can specify and say 5 or 10 or 45 or 102. When we execute this, 5, 10, 45, and 102. Now we do have other logical operators like or and not and things like that. So what we can say is, using different logical operators, we can say where business entity ID equals 5 or business entity ID equals 10 or business entity ID equals 45. Now this is using the OR operator, logical operator, and of course it will execute about the same way. I didn't specify the fourth one, it's getting kind of redundant. So using OR will specify it either has to equal 5 or 10 or 45. The same thing that our IN was saying. Another logical operator you can use is and that might be used when you want to combine multiple sets of information. So let's say, for instance, what I want to do is I want to find a specific employee. Let's say I want to find employees who are from human resources, all right, .employee, and from here they must have a business entity ID greater than 50, and let's say gender must equal female, and marital status should equal married. So it will look for all the IDs that are above 50 and make sure the gender is set to F and the marital status is set to M. Running this, I get all of these, and let's check. Marital status all M, yes they are. Gender all F, yes they are. IDs all greater than 50, and yes they are. So this is using your where condition with normal mathematical operators and logical operators. Now, the last couple of statements in your DQL are group by, having, and order by statements. Group by is used to combine similar values in columns. So if you have names repeating and you want to combine them into one set, you say group by name and the names will be combined. Having is used to filter conditions for what are called aggregates. Aggregates are types of functions that perform mathematical operations. Order by is used to display data in a specific order that you choose of. So you can choose these maybe ascending or descending based on whatever column you have. Over to the right-hand side, we see grouping, having, and we see ordering being used. So on the first one, we see select all from table name, group by name. The next one, we see select all from table, having, and then using an aggregate greater than 30. And the last one, simply ordering the data, and we see ID descending. By default, ordering is ascending. Now, these are more advanced parts of DQL, so for right now, you guys can just know what they are, and then we'll discuss them at a later video. Now, there's something a little bit tricky about knowing how these statements work. We have the order we must write these in, and that is select, from, where, group by, having, order by. This is the proper order. We have to write the syntax. If we don't write it in the correct order, our query will not execute. However, SQL Server actually will execute this in a different manner because logically this doesn't make sense. You'll notice that you can't really select columns if you don't know where they're actually from. So what SQL Server actually does is it checks your from to get the table. It uses where to find the conditions. It then will use group to group the information together into different categories. It will use having to filter out any other aggregate conditions, and then it will select the columns you have chosen, and last, order everything. So it's very important for you to know the proper way we have to write it, and then the proper way SQL Server actually executes it. That way it can help you better understand the logic of how SQL Server actually functions. Please note down any questions you have, and they'll be answered in the Q&A portion of the training. Now, to summarize in this video, you should now be able to understand and explain the different DQL statements that we have. You should also be able to use and write the various syntaxes needed to perform the DQL operations. You should be able to use select, from, where, and at least explain group by, having, and order by. Thank you. This concludes our video. This has been Module 2, Session 1, Data Query Language.